Now, India is aiming to join the global supply chain and become a major manufacturing hub for the world soon. In the latest report that India Ratings and Research has put out, the National Logistics Policy and the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan are going to be great players to be able to enable this. And these schemes are helping transform India's logistics universe, probably bring down the cost, also increase the efficiency. All this is from the first last mile connectivity report. To decode that report and how India's infrastructure could be improved, let's connect with Dr. Sunil Kumar Sinha. He is the Principal Economist and Senior Director of Public Finance at India Ratings and Research. Dr. Sinha, great to have you with us this evening. Do tell us upfront the biggest challenges that you have identified in your research when it comes to the logistics universe in India right now.
Well, first of all, logistics, the word logistics may sound very simple, but it's a fairly complex phenomena. I mean, in the sense that right from the place from where the goods are sourced and by the time the goods are delivered at the customer's end, it's a fairly long and a very difficult set of, issues involved. Now, what has been lagging in the Indian context is that India has been aiming to become a major manufacturing hub, and there have been several initiatives that have been taken over the years to do so. But one of the constraints that has been somewhere impacting the India's say assimilation into either the global supply chain, or even for that matter whatever goods and services that are delivered within the country, they were coming at a cost which was way above the global benchmarks. The recent efforts by the government by announcing the national logistics policy along with the PM Gati Shakti, what they are attempting is to actually bring the larger pieces of the logistics into place. Now, whether that is port, whether that is road, whether that is airports, all of that, and also along with that the whole system of dedicated freight corridor, then creating the multimodal logistics parts. These are all part and parcel of this larger plan to ensure that the logistics costs, firstly, the logistics costs come down, and secondly, the logistics becomes more of a seamless exercise rather than a much cumbersome exercise at the moment. While we believe that NLP as well as the PM Gati Shakti are doing a good job in terms of improving the logistics infrastructure in the country, we saw that the challenge at the moment, I mean, this is still a work in progress, and it will take much longer time really to attain whatever has been the objective. But the challenge that we believe remains somewhat unaddressed by the larger national logistics policy, or for that matter, PM Gati Shakti, is the last mile connectivity, or so-called the first mile connectivity. And these challenges emerge largely because if one is talking about the urban areas, then urban areas give you a different kind of a challenge in terms of congestion, in terms of various kinds of restriction, and also the fact that warehouses are not located within the urban areas, and in many cases loading unloading becomes a very, very cumbersome exercise.
Right.
Now, if you talk to rural areas, the rural areas road infrastructure or accessing the goods which you want to transport, maybe from the agricultural field to the final consumer, that connectivity is not there.
So how are the policies that have been framed already, Dr. Sinha, how are they addressing the last mile connectivity, and perhaps do we need another policy push to be able to get that piece in place?
Look, I mean, if you look at the national logistics policy, or for that matter, the PM Gati Shakti, the key aim of the PM Gati Shakti is to bring different government departments, whether it is railways, roadways, ports, airports, all of them on one platform, so that they can plan and design the logistics infrastructure in a way that the movement of logistics becomes a seamless activity. So far, that is good, but the fact remains that the last mile connectivity. I mean, in fact, last year's budget, the finance minister did talk about that they have identified 100 spots
Yes.
which can be converted into something which can actually facilitate the first or last mile activity.
Right.
But the point that we are making is that even if you have a, say, dedicated freight corridor,
Yes.
they can actually handle the large consignments.
Right.
But the small consignments, which essentially comes to the existing railway platforms, they will still not be able to meet the similar treatment as the larger,
Right.
consignment be. So
So
one
you
of the
speak about the freight corridor, Dr. Sinha, but
Yes.
I'm wondering also about the split between the railways and roadways, 65% railways to 26% roadways. Is that a good mix according to you? Do we need to boost perhaps air freight at this stage? And is that likely to happen soon?
Certainly, the aim is to increase the share of railways into the overall freight to 45%, which is currently at 26%. So the national rail policy is aiming towards that. And apart from that, as I said, the dedicated freight corridor is also going to address that to a large extent. But in spite of that, the challenge would remain that most of our railway platforms or railway stations have been constructed or designed in a way that they simply cannot facilitate the road movement very easily. Now, to some extent, the freight corridors are designed that way that you can actually load a truck onto the dedicated freight corridor, and the truck can unload itself after reaching the destination. So there will be a seamless connectivity. But such kind of things can happen only for large consignment. For small consignments, you will have to redesign and also look at the smaller stations which are available in far-flung areas from where you can source either the raw material or any other goods,
Yes.
and then seamlessly transport it
But
to
Dr.
the
Sinha, you
destination.
mentioned two important problems, and one is cost. The other is that it is still very cumbersome. To be able to address these problems and to bring it at par with international benchmarks, what is the requirement at this stage? We are going into the presentation of a budget, though it's an interim budget, a vote on account. Tell us what you expect now to happen to be able to plug the holes, as it were.
Look, so far as the budget is concerned, as you rightly said, it's an interim budget, so I'm not expecting any major announcements to happen. It will more of a budget which will allow the government to continue its expenditure till the time the next budget or the full budget is presented in the month of July. But in the interim, the other thing that I expect from this budget is that, as I said earlier, that FM had announced in the fiscal year 24 budget that 100 locations have been identified which can actually reduce the first or last mile connectivity related issues. So
Right.
what has been the progress, whether the allocation which was done for that, and at the same time, I also believe that the identification of those 100 points is not a one-year agenda.
Right.
It's a pretty long-term agenda.
Sure.
So sustained movement with respect to those announcements and how
Yes.
how much progress have happened,
Yes.
etc., should find some reflection in the budget.
But Dr. Sinha,
is what
when
I
it
am
comes to
expecting.
certain businesses, because you're talking about first and last mile connectivity, some businesses, for them, it is very crucial to get that piece in place. Which are the sectors that you've identified that are suffering the most because we are not being able to address this problem effectively enough?
Look, I mean, it is not any specific sector, but I mean, if I were to identify, I mean, say, for example, we all the time talk about making agriculture more commercially viable. And one of the biggest challenge, at least, may not be so far as food grains are concerned, but certainly for fruits and vegetables, is the seamless connectivity with the final destination, so that these perishable commodities can have a good warehouse. When I'm talking about logistics, it's not just the transportation, it is also the warehouse where the goods can be stored and from where it can be transported. So all of that is part of the overall logistics scheme. So agriculture is one. Similarly, if we have to look at the connectivity for some of the goods like coal, iron ore, etc., that is being transported across. And there also we feel that the last mile connectivity, particularly between the rail and the port, is still a work in the progress. So all of that needs to be looked into. Similarly, the small businessmen who actually say import some of the things, government has come out with what is called they can rather than going through the usual process, they can directly take their consignment or from the port without going through the customs clearance. But that has not really taken off, because most of these small players do not have the warehouse or wherewithal to really take the container directly out of the port and then transport it to their destination.
Correct.
So one of the things that really needs to be addressed is the large multimodal players, which are not
Yes.
they do not have a very significant presence in the India.
Correct.
So they need to be promoted, they need to be brought in so that they can provide the last mile
Yes.
connectivity, which small businesses on their own cannot do.
Absolutely. All these points are well taken, and we hope that the centre is listening in, because at this point in time, to get the logistics piece, and you said that it is a complex piece, as it were. You talk about logistics, you're talking about an entire universe, but it is central to get much of our economy moving and to grow at the pace that we'd like it to move. Thanks very much for joining us, Dr. Sinha, with this decoding of the report that you've put together. Thanks indeed for joining us on India Tonight. Meanwhile, in their update,